Welcome back, Dram Fam, to another episode on the Whisky Diary. So you're here because you want to know 5 whiskies that would be good for beginners? Let me explain. So before we get going, there are a few things I want to go over to kind of justify why I've chosen the whiskies that I have. So obviously there are a lot of whiskies to choose from, and so I thought it best to kind of narrow it down by giving myself some constraints on what could steer my decisions. Firstly, let's define what is a beginner. If you've never tried whiskey before, do I recommend you jump straight on Amazon or Master of Malt or Whiskey Exchange and buy all of these whiskies? Absolutely not. If you've never ever tried whiskey before and you think it might be for you, I'd suggest getting yourself down to a bar or a pub, something that, for instance, if you're in Glasgow, highly recommend the Pot Still on Hope Street, the Bon Accord, the Ben Nevis. These are whiskey bars. They have a lot of whiskey, amongst other things. And the staff there are knowledgeable. They will help you choose. They'll guide you. I would always recommend trying it first before you go and invest money in bottles. Some people can find spirits quite full on. So it's something that I'd suggest trying before you go out and spend your hard-earned money on bottles. So for the purposes of this video, a beginner is probably someone that has an idea of what they like, but is looking to try something new. Secondly, I've only selected single malt Scotch whiskies. Now there are loads of fantastic blended whiskies and world whiskies and grain whiskies, but they could be videos in and of themselves. I think it's probably fair to say that in the context of this channel, Scotch malt whiskey is something I know best and definitely a whiskey that I'm more comfortable with. Now we are down to the real nitty gritty. All the whiskies should be available. I don't think it's fair for me to sit here and tell you how fantastic this particular whiskey is if you can only get it in one shop in the Faroe Islands once a year, of which there are only ever 17 bottles produced. That doesn't help anyone, really. I'm sure there are lots of fantastic, affordable, rare whiskies, but is it something I think I should be recommending? Certainly for a beginner, probably not. The other thing that I think all of these whiskies should be are affordable. Now, obviously the price ranges of whiskey are broad. You've got some super cheap, easily available whiskies in your supermarket, all the way up to some of the rarest and finest whiskies that money can buy, subjectively of course. My goal is to recommend whiskies which aren't going to break the bank, and you know what, if I recommend it and you buy it and you don't like it, it's not going to be a huge amount of money down the drain. I've aimed for most of these whiskies to be £45 and below. Now the reason I chose that is because, in my opinion, you can get some absolutely incredible whiskies for £45 and below. And while there are lots of whiskies available in, say, the supermarket for 18 to 25, 30 pounds, that's not really where I wanted to tailor this video, which brings me on to my last point, and that's off the beaten track. That's a pretty loose definition, but I wanted to select whiskies which you're not gonna walk in to your local Morrison's or Tesco or whatever and pick off the shelf. Well, I don't know, one of these I found in a supermarket quite recently, but then I'm in Scotland and we have slightly different things on our shelves. But I didn't want to give you something that you're gonna find in any pub. I wanted to give you something that was a little bit more special than that. Something that, you know, you could really talk about and that you're not going to find everywhere. I thought it'd be nice to select whiskies that are a bit different to what you may find in anyone's cupboard or on anyone's shelf. And if you're like me, you like to find something, learn about it, grow and get into it, this might give you an opportunity to find something to share with other whiskey drinkers that maybe they haven't had before. A fantastic tournament, an opportunity to share and grow with other people, which personally for me is something that whiskey is about. For me, that's one of the big reasons why I like drinking whiskey. With all that said, here are my top 5 whiskies for beginners. And I'll probably chuck a couple of extra bonus ones in there for people that are looking for something just a little bit more special. Let's get down to trying some whiskey, shall we? So first on the list is the Glenallachie 12. This is a 12-year-old whiskey from the Glenallachie distillery in Speyside. I've actually done a full review of this whiskey on the channel before, which I'll link in the description below and a card on the screen. So I'm not going to go too deep into the tasting notes. I have obviously drunk this whiskey before, but it'd be rude if I didn't taste it for you now. Regular viewers of the channel are probably not surprised this is on here. This is one of my favourite whiskies of all time and is incredibly affordable. You can pick this up on Master of Malt for £44.99, but you can often find it for just a little bit cheaper than that elsewhere. The reason I selected this is it's such a broad spectrum of flavours. It's very sweet, it's very approachable, and it's up at 46%, which allows a lot more of that flavour to come forward and will definitely help you get used to some more of the stronger whiskies. Obviously, a lot of supermarket whiskies, while not bad, tend to be bottled at 40% and rarely 43 and 46, although it's becoming a lot more common now. Oh, it's fantastically sweet, spicy, jammy, fruity, super accessible. What I really like about this whiskey is it's only £45, but for me this has got so much flavour for your £45. Again, sweet, jammy, delicious, moorish, mouth-watering, but very accessible. There's not a lot in there that's going to offend many people. And because it's so sweet and juicy, up at that 46%, that sweetness knocks a bit of the alcohol down a bit. So although it's 46%, which you can imagine for people that aren't used to drinking neat spirits could be quite off-putting, this is a really nice way to ease yourself into those higher ABVs. This is a staple on my shelf, and I have no doubts that many people who buy this and try it, it will become a staple on their shelf too. It's also a fantastic way to showcase what different casks can do to a whiskey. So this was finished in Oloroso and PX sherry casks, as well as virgin oak. So if that's something you want to learn more about, this is a great whiskey to taste what exactly a sherry cask can do to a whiskey. So number 2, we're now over on Islay with the Bunnahabhain 12. Again, this is another one of these whiskies which I think is absolutely incredible. You can find this on Master of Malt for £45, although again, you can often find it cheaper elsewhere. This is a whiskey to me that just screams of quality and craft. Again, it's bottled up at 46%. Yeah, 46.3%. This I find is a little less sweet than, well, this is a lot less sweet than the Glenallachie. But again, it's been finished in some sherry casks, so you're getting a little bit more of that sherry influence, although this I find to be a little more nutty, a little bit more toasty. Such a stunning whiskey. A little bit more of a saltiness, a little bit drier. Less fruit and more vanilla, kind of those kind of baking spices going on. It's just a great whiskey. I can see a lot of people probably detecting a hint of smokiness in here. And what's really interesting about the Bunnahabhain distillery is that obviously a lot of distilleries on Islay like to use a lot of peat in their whiskies, and so kind of Islay is synonymous with peaty whiskey. What's fantastic about this is an unpeated whiskey, which is obviously a fantastic talking point when you know enough about whiskey to understand that Islay is the peaty place for whiskey. But then when you pull out a Bunnahabhain, which is obviously an Islay whiskey, and it's unpeated, I think that's a great piece of knowledge and a great talking point when sharing this whiskey. For our third whiskey, we are over on the Isle of Arran with the Arran 10-year-old. Now this whiskey has won quite a few awards. A lot of people have touted this as the best whiskey of 2021. This is another whiskey I've reviewed on the channel, so I'll link to that down below. This is another one of those whiskies bottled up at 46%. And again, another one that just screams of quality. A nice, sweet, honey, citrusy nose. Tons of flavour. Super juicy, not overly sweet, not overly dry. Right down the middle, super middle of the road, accessible whiskey. If you've got someone that doesn't really know what they like, this is a fantastic whiskey to try them on and see what about this they enjoyed. You can then use that to steer them in the right direction for what to taste next. It's actually one of the cheapest whiskies that I'm showcasing today. So you can pick this up from the distillery for about £38, which I think is an absolutely fantastic price for a 10-year-old whiskey bottled at 46% from a distillery that consistently churns out fantastic whiskies. That brings us to whiskey number 4. This time we're back over on Islay with the Kalila 12. So this is a peated whiskey. Obviously we're going to have lots of fans of peaty and smoky whiskey, and so obviously we have to include something from Islay that's got some peat in it. Now the reason I chose this and not an Ardbeg or a Laphroaig, well, Ardbegs are fantastic. I'm a huge fan of the distillery. Maybe not quite so easy to get hold of all the time. Secondly, quite a lot of people independently bottle Kalila. If this is something that you like, you can pretty readily go on the internet and find lots of independent bottlers such as Dranmore and Gordon MacPhail, for instance. I mean, they're two that I've got on the shelf that will independently bottle this. So you can find some really interesting expressions, and it's kind of a gateway to exploring a whiskey that you know in different expressions that you don't, which for me is another big part of drinking whiskey. Independent bottling is something that A, I'll have a video coming out on very soon, and B, is such an interesting aspect to drinking whiskey, which a lot of people don't understand or don't explore. They think that a Kalila that doesn't have, Kalila on the bottle as the bottler somehow makes it inferior, but in many instances, I've got some absolutely stunning Kalilas on the shelf in various different permutations. So let's get on to tasting it. Now, this one's bottled at 43%. Nice peaty, iodine-y, what you would expect from peaty whiskey. Some nice medicinal notes coming through, good smokiness, but good wood and good sweetness as well. So you may be asking,
but Ben, why didn't you choose a Laphroaig? That's affordable and readily available.
When I first got into whiskey and I asked for a smoky whiskey or a peaty whiskey, the first whiskey that I was given was a Laphroaig, and I thought it was shit. I thought that's what all peated whiskey tastes like. And while a lot of people are huge fans of Laphroaig, it tends to be quite polarising, to be honest. I think for some it can be a bit much, especially if you like some smoky whiskies. I think Laphroaig for some can just be a bit too much. And the last thing we want to do really is put people off trying something that they might actually turn out to really, really enjoy. So I went with the Kalila. I find it's a fantastic balance between the two. And again, still has the nice salty oiliness that you would expect from a coastal Islay whiskey. For now, we're on to number 5. This time we are back up in Speyside with the Glenfarclas 105. Why have I picked the Glenfarclas 105? This is the only whiskey here that doesn't have an age statement. And I chose this because this is cask strength. So this is bottled all the way up at 60%. Cask strength being, this is the strength that it comes directly out of the cask. While it does say Highland on the bottle, this is a Speyside. And this is one of the first, this really for me was the whiskey that inspired my love of cask strength whiskies. Remember, if you're not a big fan of the strength, you can always water it down a touch, but Glenfarclas have a long history of producing incredible whiskies. And this is, you can pick this up from Master of Malt for about £47, £48. Again, can find it cheaper elsewhere. And really demonstrates what a good quality cask strength whiskey can be, and that it can be affordable. Now, while this is a no age statement whiskey, we can always ask the question, does age matter? Well, I made a video on that, which I'll link down in the description below. But this is rumoured to have been aged from between 8 to 10 years in both sherry and bourbon casks. And on the nose, you get some of that subtle fruit, vanilla, toffee, a little bit of nuttiness. But it smells big and juicy, which for me is what's important. It doesn't smell terrifying and strong and overly alcoholic. Incidentally, this was rated as the best bang for your buck whiskey back in 2004. See, what I love is that big cask strength hit, which you don't really get from any other whiskies here. Obviously, it's not for everyone, and you can always put a drip of water in it to tame that. But that's what I love about this whiskey. It's beautifully sweet with nice sort of toffee notes lingering around. Honey, sweet, maybe even a touch of smokiness going on in there as well. It's just such a fantastic whiskey. And I think a lot of people see the ABV and go, 60% is too much for me. Well, try it, because you'd be very surprised at, for a cask strength whiskey, how approachable this is as a dram. So, as promised, I have a couple of extras, honourable mentions as it were, to throw in on the end. Maybe for those that have a little bit more money to spend and want something that's just a little bit more out there, a little bit more unknown, and something they can share. So, firstly, we have the Glencadam 15. Again, this is from the Glencadam distillery. This is a Highland distillery, and this is bottled again up at 46%. Now, the reason I mention this, it's a little bit more expensive. You find this around £57, £58, but it is incredibly light, incredibly delicate. This for me is another one of those whiskies that screams quality. Big tropical notes on the nose, super mango, pineapple, passion fruit. Nice cereal notes underneath it. Very light, very delicate, very approachable. And it's a 15-year-old, which, again, age doesn't matter, but those extra few years that this has on the Glencadam 10 make a world of difference, to my palate anyway. A really good, sweet, delicious whiskey at, I'd say, affordable, but if you've got that little bit extra budget to push up to 55, 60 pounds, well worth it, in my opinion. And lastly, probably one of my all-time favourite whiskies at the moment, because that does change, the Glendronach 15. This is an absolute sherry bomb of a whiskey. Tons of dark fruits, nuttiness, sweetness, but not sugary sweetness. Spiciness, raisins, dark fruits, dried fruits, like everything you can imagine. This is such a big, big whiskey, incredibly moorish. The reason this is up in the last part of this video is this is about £67, so obviously quite a bit over that 45-ish pound threshold that we tend to go for. But honestly, this is such a beast of a whiskey. I remember the first time I tried this in the pot still, I pretty much immediately went online and bought a bottle of it, and I don't regret it at all. Super big, chewy, fruity nose. Beautifully rich, dark chocolate, honey, dark fruits, and a finish that just goes on forever. Like I say, it's a bit more expensive, but it's a 15-year-old, and you're getting all 15 years of it. It's massive. I'm literally getting Nutella on the nose right now. Like a nice sweet toasted hazelnuts. This is an incredible whiskey, and like I say, I know it's expensive, but if you've kind of worked your way through most of these and you get into a point where you're looking for something, you're looking to spend a little bit more money and you're looking for something just a little bit more special, this would be my recommendation. An absolutely stunning whiskey. But anyway, that's enough from me. Thank you all very much for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, please do drop a like down below. And honestly, just comment any whiskies that you feel are fantastic, kind of start the whiskies. Whiskies for people that are just really getting into their whiskey journey. If you'd like to support the channel, please do hit the subscribe button, and you can click the bell icon to be notified whenever I upload. And on that note, what are we going to go for? I reckon... Sure, let's go back for the Glendronach. Salanjava.